Yo guys, Vision SGN here, bringing you more Marvel Rivals content. In today's video, I'll be teaching you how to win in Marvel Rivals, sharing tips on how to get better, how to understand the game, and more importantly, how to win. As I've seen a lot of players are struggling to currently climb the ranks in competitive, and I've seen this all over Discord and Twitter. So on that note, let's get right into it. So first things first, before I start breaking down how to win and sharing you all of my tips, I think a lot of players who are currently struggling to climb the ranks right now are failing to see what is the obvious, and that is you cannot change what you can't control. If other players on your teams just aren't changing, or you seem to be doing everything you possibly can but you still can't win, unfortunately, in a game like this, with the strategy style that is put in place for you, you just cannot do anything more, and it is what it is. Now, of course, you can go above and beyond and excel at doing what you're meant to be doing, i.e., playing your role and being a good version of yourself, but that's all you can do for the most part. So I wouldn't necessarily beat yourself up, because sometimes in this current meta, with the way the game and the rank play system works, you just can't seem to get wins when you're in one of those losing streaks. And look, I know that's not right. You don't want to just load up this game and get into a losing streak, especially when it's out of your control and it's due to mainly teammates who just don't really belong in the rank you're in. And I'm sure with the promising start we've had so far from the developers, I'm absolutely certain that they're looking at this at a high priority. And with the mid-season reset that was set to happen, I think that would have resolved some of these issues. But hey, like I said, we cannot change what we can't control. So for what you can do, and I will begin breaking down tips and tricks on what you want to be learning and doing as a player to win you games. Now, as tip number one, I would suggest learning all of the heroes in this game, their abilities, their strengths, and their weaknesses. To be aware of what each character can do will help you develop, and you'll become a lot better, as you'll be more conscious of what's going on, and you'll be capable of recognizing situations better, being able to read the room, which will help you win. That I promise you. There are some players in this game that just don't know what certain abilities do on certain characters that they come across, and at the higher ranks, this will eventually expose you, as you won't know who your counters are. Now, I'm not saying that everyone has the time in the world to be able to learn every character and play them. I just mean understanding what each character can do will help you go a long way and help you develop as a player, because there are certain players I've played alongside that don't even know what some of the abilities are, or don't even know whose ability was used, and it can cost you and cause you problems. So for me, definitely learn all of the heroes in this game as a beginner. And what I mean by that, as an example, is an advanced and simple strategy you could develop is learning how to count and recognize which ultimates have been used and who is on the enemy team. So if an invisible ult has been used, or another healing ult has been used, you then want to save your offensive ults, things like the Kraken Impact from Winter Soldier as such, for when they finish, so that then the other team is vulnerable and has nothing to use. And believe it or not, a lot of players don't do that. They just use their ultimates as soon as they earn them, because they think that's the right thing. And likewise, if you're a strategist player yourself, you can then save your healing ult for when the enemy team uses theirs to then counter theirs, making it a more even and balanced playing field for your entire team. And that way you're creating more value, as the enemy team can't make or take an advantage of their one. And it goes the same with offensive ultimates. If you can look at your scoreboard, see who's on your team, and know when other players on your team have their ultimates, you can combine the two, creating more value, and allows you to push around the map as a unit, because you can secure map positioning and use it as a power play to win you the game. Now, as for point number two, I cannot stress this one enough. You need to build a player pool of 2 to 3 heroes at least per category. And what I mean by that is you need to learn all of the categories, as this will massively help you understand the game better, teach you how to work alongside other heroes and their roles, and how to fit into a system, but also allows you to build synergy between certain heroes that just work well together, such as team ups and different playstyles. And what I mean by that is, if you just are the same player who uses the tanks, for example, which I do a lot of the time, I'm pretty good at playing the vanguards, but I do know how to play a duelist, a strategist. Now I have many different options that I can use at any given time, depending on what the situation is. So if the team needs me to be a strategist, I can use several, whether it be I'll use Rocket for the team up with Winter Soldier, or I use Luna for the Namor team up, or whatever it may be, I have those options available. And for as myself as a player, that's the main thing I'm trying to learn, is to master pretty much every character in the game, so that when any of the characters become meta, or if anyone needs me to go any character for whatever reason, I can do that, and it can be available for my teammates. And that, believe it or not, helps you win games far more than pretty much every other thing in this game right now. I cannot stress it enough, as I've mentioned, and it's criminal how many players just use the same character because they've got them bored or because they think they're really good at that character, and for the most part, the map doesn't suit it, or the current team system that you've got just doesn't suit having a certain player, i.e., Spider-Man. You always get people that play those sort of characters that just don't change. They think they're better than everyone else, and for the most part, they will cost you the game because you need every player to be on the same page at the higher levels. You're only as good as your weakest link for the most part. So if you don't know how to change between the categories, you're really going to let yourself down and you're going to struggle to climb those ranks because believe it or not, you cannot just maintain the same role every single game. So as point number 3, I would say learn your role and the play style of each character. If you are a Vanguard, a duelist, or a strategist, you need to play to your strengths and play your role. And what I mean by that is if you're in a system where you have 3 supports, you need to know if you're the primary healer, you need to know if you're the support player, or you need to know if you're the damage dealer or the diving character and such. If you don't know the difference between these, I would highly recommend you go check out some of my other videos on the channel, which I have various different videos that explains all types of categories and smaller subcategories of players, i.e. duelists aren't just one category. There are many different types of duelists in this game, as we all know, but there are diving duelists, ranged duelists, hybrid, you name it. There are many different types, and if you don't know the difference between these categories, you're not going to know when it's going wrong and why, because some maps just don't suit ranged heroes, some maps don't suit dive heroes, some team compositions don't suit these playstyles, and it's being able to read between the lines and learn which works and why, and also knowing other heroes could work for your team, such as team ups, as I mentioned, or for whatever reason you need a third support, or maybe you need 3 tanks for point pressure. It just changes the way you learn the game, and believe it or not, it will help you win the game. Now, on that, the 4th point I would mention is being able to adjust team composition and who will work and why, and don't just be the same hero, as I mentioned, insta-locking every game, as that doesn't work. And if you're one of those guys that doesn't change your hero, then believe it or not, you're more likely going to be exposed, as other teams in game modes where it's like domination, you have 3 rounds. If it goes to the 3rd round, teams will figure out how to counter you and they will likely change. The team that changes the most is more often likely to win the game. So I do not want to see teammates on my team moaning about winning or blaming heals if they've been Spider-Man all game, because more likely than not, the other team has created a strategy between themselves, between maybe 1 or 2 players, and they will figure out how to counter that player. So definitely you need to be adjusting throughout the game. And now as for point number 5, there are various things that you should not be doing and you want to avoid doing in order to be the best version of yourself, be a good team player, but also win you games more importantly. Now, the first thing I would say is do not solo ult. Do not use your ultimate when you're the last man standing and your entire team dies and you want to try and use your ultimate to make a heroic play, which never works because you're going to get 1, maybe 2, even maybe 3, but then the other 3 players will beat you and take you out, and then it's all for nothing because you're staggered, your team's off spawn slower, and then the other team's going to have 3 players left plus on point, and it's just not worth doing. Also, don't use your ultimate too early when you're the first person to the point, as it creates less value when you can't combine ultimates or create map positioning out of using an ultimate. So just don't do that. Also, don't blame things that are outside of your control, such as healing or teammates changing. You can't just sit there and go, oh, I need healing, but your teammates are getting dove on by Spider-Man, Venom, Black Panther, Magic, whatever it may be. It's not because they're not good at healing. It's probably more likely that they're getting dove on and they need help. They need someone to counter dive. So don't sit there and be one of those guys that just blames things that are very easily misunderstood, and try and recognize the situation. Also, I would suggest focus on being the best version of yourself and focus on what you can control. As I've mentioned over and over again, if you can't do something because you need another teammate to do it, don't sit there and start typing in chat and just wasting time. Just try and do whatever it is that you can do. It may be that the other team's supports just won't die and you need another player to be on your team to help you do that, but for whatever reason your duelists just aren't getting the final execution. So you might want to change to the likes of Moon Knight, who can single-handedly sneak around the back line and deal with the situation himself, although you won't be doing what you was obviously doing before, which may have been tanking or whatnot, but you can change your playstyle to change the game and help win you games. Also, another thing you want to avoid doing is flanking all the time. If you're one of those dive heroes like Psylocke, Black Panther as such, don't just constantly take those routes that get you around the back of the map really sneakily and then keep doing that over and over again to the point where your 5-man team, the rest of your teammates, are on their own and man down because you're always trying to flank. It doesn't help your team. If you do it once in a while, it's fine, because of course it's about playing to your strengths and trying to get key or crucial kills on the map. But if you constantly do it, you're just going to make it worse for your team. As I mentioned, the numbers disadvantage will cost your team, so don't be that guy. Now also, Don't just be a one-dimensional player based on your role, i.e. if you're a strategist, don't just sit there healing the whole game and never dealing damage. You guys are really good at dealing damage and helping clear a wave of enemies if you use damage at the right time. Same as if you're a tank. Do not just sit there and just soak up damage constantly and never try and push out and never try and create map positioning, as you're going to get to a situation where your team is just stuck and staggered and isolated on point. And also, don't be one of those duelists that just keeps hitting the same enemies, has 30k plus damage at the end of the game, and then sits there and go, oh, I dropped 30k damage and we still lost, but you only had 7 kills. I cannot stress how annoying it is to be a tank player myself, like Magneto or Strange, where I'm sitting there on the point, I'm absorbing a shitload of damage, and then for some reason, I've got a duelist or a Moon Knight behind me that just keeps hitting the Groot in front of me. They keep getting healed, so rather than going for the strategist and removing the healers, my duelists just keep hitting the same 2 tanks, and it just keeps feeding these strategist ultimates and allows them to get their healing ults quicker, which we all know are the game-changing ultimates in this game, so just don't be one of those guys. And also, to finally mention, I would stop being one of those guys who cares about stats. It's not about who does the most damage or healing or blocked. Obviously, you can see when you're struggling or your teammate's struggling, and you might want to recommend changing. But if you are one of those guys who gets caught up on the scoreboard and constantly keeps typing in chat that my duelist has 3 kills and my tank has 10, he's the problem, it's not going to help the situation more often than not. Obviously, like I said, you can recommend that they change their character, as it might be the wrong matchup, it might be the wrong playstyle, it just doesn't fit in the comp. But as I mentioned, the most important thing to remember is you cannot change what you can't control, so don't be one of those guys, as it will not end well more often than not. So that's it for me in all of my tips and tricks to share to help you win games in Marvel Rivals. I promise you now, if you go through this step by step and try and figure out where you're weaker and what you don't quite understand, you are going to win more games by excelling and reading this list and understanding it better, because believe it or not, there are players at the higher ranks who just don't know certain areas of the game and don't know certain characters or what they're capable of doing, or they just don't change their playstyle, and they are the problem. And like I said, you cannot change that. So try and be one of those teammates that isn't one of those guys, and you will help yourself win games and you will help your team. So hopefully that video helps you guys with learning how to win games and be a better teammate. If you enjoyed the video, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, as it massively helps me out. If you have any suggestions or comments you want to share, please let me know down below. I'm Vision SGN, and I'll see you in the next one.